Hello. So it's been a while since we've done any tags, and so we're actually recording a few today, and then we'll put them up for the next few weeks, so we won't be as far behind on everything. It's been a rough couple months, so this is a little out of date. We were gonna do the Stephen King book tag, for I don't know, Halloween somewhere.
Everybody knows Stephen King loves Thanksgiving.
Yeah, so
unless it comes out around Christmas, then he loves Christmas. Or if it comes out around Valentine's, you get it. You get the idea.
Yeah.
It's March 4th also.
Okay, right. So we don't know when we're posting this. So, anyway, so we were supposed to do it for Halloween, and that, October kind of fell apart, and November basically has fallen apart. So we'll see what we can do. Anyway, so the first question is, how did you get into reading Stephen King? So I'm going to answer the questions first, as I normally do, because that gives Sir Chong some time to think, because he doesn't see the questions often in advance.
I'm not one who preps.
Right, he doesn't prep. And then meanwhile, he's yelling about our cheese tag. We got to prep. And I'm like, you don't prep, so it doesn't matter. Yeah,
anyway. The cheese tag is complex and multi-layered, like a fine cheese.
Fine.
Cheese
but
really layered, but whatever.
Anyway, Velveeta has layers.
That's not a fine cheese. That's a plastic ooze.
Right. Anyway, so...
Sponsored by Velveeta.
I'm not as big of a Stephen King fan as Sir Chong, so this is going to be a little... Mine are going to be like, I don't know. But we'll see how we do. So, number one, how did you get into reading Stephen King? And so, I don't know. This is probably pretty common for people in our age, and we're in the Gen X, we're too old for this crap kind of age group. But basically, there wasn't really YA when we were growing up. And, eventually there was when we were like teenagers, and that was like R.L. Stine and Christopher Pike and that stuff. But you essentially had kids' books, and they were like legit kids' books. And then you had a few kind of YA things like Choose Your Own Adventure and like Sweet Valley High and things that you could maybe make the argument were like a little bit older, but they were written really young. They just had like a little more complex themes, and they had like more violence and sexual stuff. Nothing like by today's standards that would be interesting, and then you basically had books for adults. And our library where I lived was set up in a way where we basically had like a basement, but it had its own entrance, and you went in, and that was the kids area. And then there was the upstairs, and you had to go through a different entrance. You could go internally, but, that was the adult library. That was the main library. But, I had spent years going into the basement, into the kids' library. And honestly, I lived in a fairly small town, and I was a super avid reader. And I was one of those nerds that would take part in all those, like, book challenges where you would, like, read for MS or something. And, like, I guess I could have just lied like everyone else did, like to get their free Pizza Hut or whatever. But I never thought to do that. I just was like, so I would set these goals. I'm like, I'm going to read 100 books during this challenge. And my friends would set that goal, and then they would get to like 80, and I'd be like, and I'd be like fighting to get to my goal and to beat them, because I have this competitive nature, I guess. And then I'd be like struggling to read as many books, and so I'm like, okay, I'm going to pick up all these kids' books. And then, then I'd find out that they, like, didn't even finish their books.
Has Stephen King ever written a book called Tangent?
Shut up.
Like, what are you even talking about?
I'm talking about how I got into Stephen King.
No, you're not. You're talking about competitive MS
anyway.
Scholastic reading.
Anyway, so the point is, by the age of, like, 10...
By the age of 86, this story will be done.
By the age of 10, I got myself, like, pretty much I had read everything that was in the kids' library. And, I was rereading things a lot. And so I was like, can I go upstairs? And it was like, you weren't supposed to get your adult library card, like, until you were, I think, 13 or 14. Like, so, the child librarian had a meeting with my mom. Like, seriously, this is how things were back then. And they were like, she's definitely reading above grade level, and we think she can handle the older content. And they had, like, talked to my school, and I got, like, permission. So that's
a lot of work to read some books.
Right, and so so at 10, I got my adult library card. So it wasn't, like, the special children's library card. And I got to go upstairs. And so I went upstairs, and I remember being like, oh, it's so beautiful up here, because it was like, versus like the kids' library, which is just like a bunch of like small shelves and like kids' toys, and it's all like falling apart because kids are like, slobs. It was like the beautiful library with like it was one of those really old school libraries with like the old, like mahogany, I don't know, huge, tall bookcases and like chandeliers, and it was so fancy. And I remember walking in there and being like, oh.
You're being played off stage.
And I remember going in there and being so excited. And then they were like, here's the fiction. And it was this tiny little alcove in this beautiful big library, because most of it was just like atlases and stuff, for people to do research. And I was like, I don't want to look at that half of the library. So I went to my little alcove. And in that alcove, there were, it was a small town. So there were some V.C. Andrews books, some Mary Higgins Clark, some Stephen King, I think maybe a Dean Koontz had strayed in there, and then like a bunch of classic literature. And so I was like, I've heard of this Stephen King man. And so that was how I read it, because that was the books in that alcove that I had heard of, that were not like classic books, and they weren't like Russian. And they were big and like intimidating, but I was like determined to read one. So that's how I got into it. How about you?
Or you could have said this. When I was little, I managed to get into the adult library and I read some Stephen King books. See how much quicker that was? You see how yours is like 74 minutes, and everyone who started watching this video has now died?
How did
My
you get into
sympathies
reading
to your
Stephen
families.
King?
So when I was a wee lad, my babysitter was reading Salem's Lot. And I was like, hey, that looks creepy. And she was like, shut up. I'm not going to do any work around here. I'm reading this book. And then I probably went outside and like played with a stick and got injured. But then a couple years after that, I was like, I sure would like some creepier stuff than what I'm reading. And one of my friends was like, who is pretty good? Stephen King. I was like, I heard that guy. I've seen several of his movies. Maybe Silver Bullet. I forget exactly what movie. But I was like, I'm going to read some of this stuff. And the first one that I read was, in fact, Salem's Lot. And I was like, I like it. And that's a much quicker story.
All right, number 2 is, what was the first Stephen King book you read? So,
I just answered that.
Well, we'll go back to it. You'll re-answer it. So, for me, I got excited to go into that area, but the only thing that was available when I got into that area was Tommyknockers.
Oh, no.
So I took out the Tommyknockers, and I tried. I tried very hard to read that book, and it was not very good. So then I was excited because the Scholastic Book Fair came to school, and the Scholastic, you could order books. And so I got Eyes of the Dragon.
Why is everything Scholastic? So much Scholastic books for you.
I don't know, I like the Scholastic Book Fair. Everybody likes the Scholastic Book Fair. Anyway, so I got Eyes of the Dragon. But I didn't finish that because there was a lot of talk about boobs, I thought. And it's funny because we had talked about this previously, and I remember going back and being like, so I went back to see if there were a lot of talk of boobs, and there's not. But the guy describes like his penis, but it's not even that like, it's not that much. It's just he's kind of like, oh, and it's sort of like, it's vague-ish, but I mean, when you're like 10, you're like, it's his penis, it's hinting at a penis. And it was basically just a talk about him having an erection, like, before his, like, wedding night or something. But I remember being, like, taken aback, and I was aghast.
The bone of the dragon.
Right. So I did not like that book, because that made me uncomfortable. So then I read Night Shift, and so that was the first one I finished. And I really, really love that. I'm not a big short story fan, but Night Shift has some of the best short stories I've ever read. What about you? What was your first one?
First book I read was Salem's Lot. And done.
Okay. Number 3. Have you read a Stephen King book published the year you were born? I don't think he published the year we were born.
I don't know. It's pretty close.
I'm going to Google this.
Yours is probably close.
Yeah, you were, like, born way after. I'm pretty sure his first...
What do you mean way?
His first book was published... Oh, yes, I have. I was born... Oh, wow. Carrie was published in 1974, and The Shining was published in 1977. So, yep.
Well, since I was born in 2003, as everybody knows, clearly there's probably a book there.
He was born during Carrie, so he read Carrie.
You can't. I have read Carrie, yeah.
Yeah, and I read The Shining.
End of the day.
So, yep, I guess we did read. I thought Stephen King was publishing in the late 70s, so I thought we were older than his books.
Late 70s, basically.
I'm late-ish 70s, yeah. Anyway.
70s.
what does that tell you? Like, that's a question. Like, there, that we even had to debate. You know, a lot of people are like, yeah, obviously, I was reading books in the 80s and 90s. Which of his books do you prefer to collect? Hardcover, paperbacks, or it doesn't matter? I don't collect his books because I think he's okay. So, Chunk?
Yeah, I really like the hardcovers. I don't like paperback is fine, but I like hardcover books. I keep my hardcover books really nice, which is why I can't let this one borrow my hardcover books. She beats the crap out of them.
Yeah, I really love, like, old
Eating
beat
books.
up.
You eat books.
No, I just like old beat up paperback books. Yeah, I tend to, if I collect people, I don't really care. Because I don't collect Stephen King, but I do collect Danielle Steele, and those are all over the place. I generally prefer, like, paperback. It's easier, smaller, takes up less space. How many of his books are on your bookshelf? I don't know. Sir Chonk, how many of his books are on our bookshelf?
I think somewhere around, like, 65, maybe? I want to say 65. It's somewhere right around there.
And I don't want to spoil Christmas, but there might be more after Christmas.
So maybe 66. Maybe this year's coming out after Christmas. You're talking about the future one in 2024. Don't spoil that one either.
I already pre-ordered that for next Christmas. So. All right. Do you know about that one? Did you even know there was a book coming out?
Well,
okay.
I'm sure.
It's a short story collection, though.
Short story collection.
All right, number 6. Stephen King is known for long and gory novels. Which of his novels was tough for you to read? I don't find him remotely gory or, like, upsetting. I mean, I think he's, like, tame in comparison to a lot of horror writers. Bentley Little, I think, is a little bit, he's way, like, gorier, and Dean Koontz can be really gory. And then, I mean, that's just, like, for, like, old school horror. And then nowadays, people are like, oh, let's be splatterpunk and be as, like, gross and disgusting as humanly possible and see if we can, like, offend as many people as possible. And that's not really my thing. But so I don't think any of them are tough for me in terms of being gory and even long. I don't mind that they're long. I would say it was hard for me to read because I didn't finish it just because I had seen the movie.
You didn't finish a lot of books.
Well, I didn't finish a lot of his just because I'd seen the movie first. And then, like, I just kept reading it. And I was like, this is basically the same as the movie. And my friends were like, yep. And the ending's kind of dumb in the book, and it's weird. And I was like, cool. So then I just didn't bother. And then I couldn't finish Tommyknockers because it's awful.
Right. So, yeah. This
tried like 5 times.
He's not particularly gory. I don't think.
Right. I don't think so
it's
either.
Pretty minimal. Like, what's that guy that writes, like, The Island of Rebecca? Was that book that I read?
Yeah, Nick Cutter. He was really
he's
gory.
Awful.
Yeah,
he's
that's
just
like
disgusting, like, animal body horror stuff. That's disgusting.
People love that guy.
For the sake of being disgusting. Like,
right.
The book doesn't have, like, much of a plot. He's just trying to be gross, which I really can't stand that. But Stephen King doesn't do that at all. There are some books that are hard to read. Some of the longer ones read quick, like It, Under the Dome, even like Stand. Those read pretty fast. But Insomnia, that's a bit of an ordeal. And yeah, I had a headache for most of the time while reading Tommyknockers because the main character has a headache like the whole time, and he just constantly talking about how he was chewing aspirin. I was like, stop talking about chewing aspirin. It's 80% of the book. Or maybe it's only 79. Anyway, boop.
Yeah, so the next one is, have you ever DNF'd a Stephen King book? So again, I just said, like, I didn't finish it because I had already seen the movie, and I really loved the movie, and then I was just like, that's kind of the same thing. I didn't, like, deliberately, like, I've never deliberately DNF'd his books. I told us
what you did with it.
No, I guess I just was like, I always felt like maybe I'd get back to it when I, like...
Get back to it?
When the movie wasn't so fresh in my mind, and then I didn't, and then another movie came out, so I don't know. Someday I'll probably read it, but, you know, again, there's only so much time in life, and you're like, I already know this story, so do I need to read it? And then I guess I technically DNF'd Tommyknockers, because I took it out of the library, like, 5 times or something, and then I just kept trying, and then it would be due back, and I'm like, I'll just return it. I'll get back to it another time. And I don't really have any interest in going back to it, so I guess I would technically have DNF'd that. But, like, I just generally don't DNF books. Like, I usually just say, I'll get back to it later, and then I don't get to it, but I don't, like, oh, that's it, I'm not bothering with this book. What about you? You don't do that at all.
Dip nachos first with the book is rare for me. Right, that's what it stands for?
Yeah.
Oh, right. So I almost did one and then didn't. So I started reading Black House a long time ago, and I got through about 30 pages, and it was 30 of the most awful pages I ever did read. Finally, I, like, punted the book across the stars, and I was like, this is awful. I'm not reading this. And then, like, I don't know when, a year ago or so, I picked up again, like, I'm going to finish this book this time, and the first 30 or 40 pages again were incomprehensibly freaking awful. But then it gets good after that. So, I don't have any that I dipped in nachos.
All right, number 8. Have you read his books in publication order? I would say accidentally. Like, they're not officially in order, but I feel like they're in, like, little chunks of, like, his 70s books, his 80s books, his 90s books. And so because I'm old, and his books were, like, are about as old as me, I think I, like, without intending to, obviously when I was 10 and 12, I was reading his 70s and 80s stuff. And then as I got older, I would read the newer stuff that came out. And then as I got older than that, I read the newer set of stuff that came out. So I would say, in a way, I've kind of read in publication order, but not, like, intending to.
Yeah, kind of similar. Like, there were only so many out when I started reading them, and then as more came out, I read more as they came out for a while. But I think I read some of his earliest ones quick, but then there was a group of his earlier ones, like Firestarter, Christine, Cujo, that I sort of just, like, didn't read for a long... Dead Zone. I
you read those
didn't
in, like,
read
the
for
late
a long
90s,
time,
right?
And then eventually I got around to reading them, because I don't know why. They just didn't really interest me for some reason, even though those are all pretty good.
Yeah, I remember you getting those from the library when, like, we first...
The library. My library security was lax. It was very easy for me to, like, make my way betwixt the
They probably
children
didn't
and
have
adult
those
section.
books. All right, number 9. What Stephen King books would you like to read but haven't read yet? I guess I'd like to read The Stand maybe at some point, just because I hear it's really good. I'd probably like to actually read Carrie. I think I read Carrie, but I can't remember if I read Carrie, just because I've seen the movie and I've seen multiple versions of... I think I've seen 3 versions of the movie. So I start to feel like, have I read this? Have I seen it? I kind of want to read the Dark Tower series, but I also don't, because Sir Chonk will go on to rant about it, and so what ends up happening is, like, I'm like, do I want to invest all this time and then be frustrated? And he says no.
Do that. You hate yourself.
And then I'm kind of interested. I think it's the Bill Hodges series that, like, just because I like mysteries.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. There's probably a lot. Like, I just haven't read a ton of Stephen King. There's a lot of his books that I just haven't read. But I'm not, like, he's just not a priority. It's, again, I don't dislike him, but he's probably, like, my 3rd or 4th favorite horror writer. Like, I love Bentley Little.
Well, he sucks, though.
And, like, I actually really like John Saul, who's super underrated. And then I think Dean Koontz and Stephen King to me are, like, equivalent, except for, like, I've read some of Stephen King's newer stuff and it's been okay. Dean Koontz, I don't even know what he's doing anymore. He's, like, off the rails. So, like, I mean, but when you're talking, like, 80s, 90s, I think I liked Dean Koontz back then better than I liked Stephen King.
Dean Koontz is not that good of a writer.
No, I know. I just happen to like his stories better. They're, like, more interesting to me.
Bentley Little's, like, the king of formula writing.
Yeah, I know, but they're super fun and cheesy.
Okay.
Anyway, which ones would you like to read?
I think there's only, like, 9 I haven't read. So I read...
So those.
all the ones I really wanted to read, I pretty much have read. I guess the one that's around that I feel like I'm probably most interested in reading, I suppose, is Dr. Sleep, which I have. I could just...
Oh, yeah, I'd like to
right
read
now,
that. I love The Shining.
because it sounds pretty cool, and of course, The Shining is good. So I guess Dr. Sleep.
Yeah, I guess I'm with you on that because I forgot about Dr. Sleep. All right, name a book he's written that other people liked but you didn't.
Oh, I got that one.
I mean, that's hard for me because there's, like, a lot that I've just been like, that don't really, I just don't get into it. But other ones that, like, I guess I finished or, like, I'm, like, looking through his list because I'm like, I think the ones I read I actually really liked. Well, I mean, Dreamcatcher, but no one liked that one. So, yeah, I don't have any that I ended up finishing that people like that I didn't. Because, like, I didn't like Christine. I never finished it, though.
You didn't finish too many books.
I love Salem's Lot. I like The Shining. I like Rage. That's the opposite. I love that, and people don't like that. I like The Long Walk. Yeah, so, like, I don't know. Like, the ones I have read, I've really liked. So, I guess Thinner, but, like, I liked it. I just didn't love it. So, I don't actually have a lot of his that people like that I don't.
All right. I got a couple.
Yeah, because you read more of his.
So first of all, Different Seasons is the one that people really like that I don't like at all. Again, I think it's because people are like, oh, yeah, Shawshank is in this. Oh, yeah, Stand By Me is in this. No, they're really not. The movies are based off them, but the stories are very different. But the one I'm going to go with is a one that I have looked at many a person's favorite Stephen King list. And I would say tons of people seem to have this in their top 5. Some people have their favorite. Most people at least have in their top 10. Hardly anyone has it outside of their top 10. And I really hated it. 11/22/63. People love this book. It is the most It is the most pointless, derpy ending. It's one of the worst endings. It's not the worst. There's one that's worse, or maybe two. But it's a really awful, generic, give up on life, doesn't know what he's doing, crap ending. Like, he has a lot of bad endings, but this is like one of the worst endings. And it's just such a time waste of a book. Like, he goes back in time to stop an assassination, which he could do at any time over the course of 5 years. And he just putzes around in this little town for half a decade. It's like about him like being a teacher and hanging out and going on dates. And it's like, this is not the book I expected. What is this crap? The book is awful. People love it. It sucks.
All right. So now we're going to get a lot of nasty comments.
Yeah, because a lot of people love it.
All right.
I don't know how you can like that ending.
I had to turn off comments on your reviews because people were just like whining about it. I'm like, go make your own list. I don't care what you think.
Yeah,
no offense.
You can have a different opinion than me. You're wrong, but you can have a different opinion.
Right. Again, like, have an opinion. You don't have to like attack us. Right. All right. Number 11. A book you think is underrated of his. So I feel like a lot of the books that I've read are the ones that people love. So, but I would say, I mean, Night Shift in general, I think it's it's really underrated in terms of, like, whenever I look at, like, his best short story collections, it's always, like, forgotten. I think it's just because it was one of his earliest. And then I would say, I think a lot of his Bachman stuff feels underrated to me. Like, I loved Regulators. And I feel like that one kind of, like, went under the radar. I love Needful Things. That's not Bachman, but I don't think a lot of people really got... I mean, obviously, it's Stephen King, so it's still fairly popular. I just don't think it's on a lot of people's, like, top on their list. I think that book's amazing. And I would say I think Long Walk is extremely underrated.
People love that.
I know, but, like, a lot of people either don't read it or, like... I mean, it is... Obviously, you run into the issue of that being a novella.
You walk into the issue.
So, because it's a novella, like, it is sort of underdeveloped in places. But I just absolutely loved that. And I always feel like, I mean, honestly, Stephen King's early stuff is just, and I think it's a commentary. Obviously, he was probably a lot more diligent about his writing. So he put a lot more, like, thought into every sentence in every section of his stories. But also, I feel like his editors probably, like, had a lot more rounds with him. Like, hey, what about this? And now I feel like he writes a draft, sends it into the editor, and they go, sounds good, we're going to make $1 million, bye. And, like, it doesn't really...
Ignore the racist parts of this. That's
right. And I don't feel like, it's not that his writing's gotten worse. I mean, it might have, but I think we're just seeing less polish because he doesn't
try. His editors don't try. Nobody tries.
Right.
I'm not going to say he doesn't try.
I mean, he's probably trying.
Put as much effort in.
But the problem is, right? He doesn't have to work as hard to sell the book. Right. You know, where he's not going out on submission with agents and, you know, hoping that they're going to like his book. And then I just think the editors maybe do like one quick pass through and go, yep, looks good, fine, and they don't care. And that's kind of like. That's just the common issue with, like, a lot of more popular writers. You start to see it. But, yeah, so I think a lot of his, like, earlier stuff tends to be underrated if it's not the most popular stuff. What about you?
Right. Well, I have a couple. Maybe I'll just talk about one, though. So this might be... I feel like I like the stuff I read earlier more than I like stuff that I've read more recently. And part of that might be that I'm just a much more whiny reader now. Like, I hate a lot more things. So if I reread some of the books that I really like by him, I might like them less because maybe they're not as good as I remember them being. But this is one that a lot of people seem to really aggressively dislike. I think most people, again, on the list, they got those things near the bottom. They're like, I don't like this book, blah, blah, it's long and stupid, I don't like it, right? But I love it. It's one of my absolute favorites. It's in the running for my favorites. The Talisman, which is awesome. I don't understand people not liking this book. We got a wolf dude. We got world hopping. We got a great villain. We got a cool ending for a change. It's awesome. I don't understand the hatred for this book. But again, I haven't read it in a long time. I might read it tomorrow and be like, wow, this is awful. What was I thinking?
Maybe it's also because it's like, since it's co-written, maybe like it doesn't have as much of like the Stephen King things people really like. I don't know. I haven't read it. So,
yeah.
But, so there's maybe things people really like about his writing that just don't come through as much. All right, so number 12, creepy characters. Which Stephen King characters would you like to have dinner with? I'm going to say, most of his characters are completely insane. So, who would I want to have dinner with out of his characters? Carrie, she's cool. I haven't read any of the books with Holly, but I really liked her in the show The Outsider. Mostly, but I don't know. I don't know if it's the character, if it's just Cynthia Erivo is really good. So I kind of like the character in the show. And then I would say I like, who's the one who crushes the guy's foot?
You mean Misery?
Yeah.
Oh, why can't I think of her
Annie?
name? Annie Wilkes.
Annie Wilkes, okay. Yeah, I'd kind of like to talk to her and be like, tell me about why you're angry.
Why are you such a fan? You're too much of a fan. You need to calm down.
Did he write that right around the time that, that guy killed John Lennon?
I don't know. I don't think so.
No.
What the heck do I know? Yeah. I don't know. I guess I might want to have dinner with Holly.
No, it's 10 years later.
Just so I can poison her.
Hey!
That character is the most annoying character, of all time.
She's super popular. People love her.
Everybody loves her, but he writes her the most idiotic Mary Sue of all time. It's trash. But I've only read her in the Hotville Hodges trilogy, so maybe she improves and isn't as garbage later on. But you might take note that a lot of the ones I haven't read, out of the 9, 3 or 4 of them have her in them. So, kind of deliberately not reading the stuff with her in it because she's so unlikable.
You're the only person I know who doesn't love her.
It's a joke. It's an embarrassingly stupid Mary Sue. People just they agree with anyway, I'm not going to get into it. So, people I do like a lot, I really like Nick and Stu from The Stand. They're very entertaining. I love Osmond as an evil villain from Talisman, as I kind of mentioned him. I forget the kid's name. The kid from Salem's Lot, the friend. Chris? No, it's I can't remember. That dude, he's really cool.
Oh yeah, all the kids from It are kind of cool.
Yep, pretty much all the kids from It. Yeah.
The Losers Club or whatever.
Yeah, all of them are pretty interesting. I don't know. Thomas from Eyes of the Dragon is pretty cool.
All right. What about Roland?
Oh yeah, Oi, of course, from Dark Tower.
Oh, okay.
Oi's the best character.
Oh. All right. Is that a dog or something?
He's a Billy Bumbler.
I don't know what that is.
Which is essentially a dog kind of thing.
Okay. Number 13.
I like Jake, too. Jake's pretty awesome.
Is he a dog?
No, he's not a dog.
Oh. Has Stephen
I
King...
like the dog from Fairy Tale also. But that's the only character in Fairy Tale I like.
Has Stephen King inspired you to start reading and writing? Yes, definitely in reading, just because it was like I said, it was my first foray into non-kids books, really. And so I was like, wow, they do a lot more in books that aren't for children. So it really opened up a lot of, and it also it helped me figure out what I liked, didn't like, and so forth.
Pausing this?
No, I haven't been, and we've been going back and forth.
But I'm saying, how are we going to edit it?
We'll do it after.
Don't you have to cut into chunks to edit it?
No, that's only video.
Oh, well, never mind. Pretend I didn't say anything, you two people.
So,
use that very black thing, jabonk.
Anyway, so, yeah, and then I've read some of his, not his blurbs, because he blurbs literally, our local, grocery circular, but, in terms of, I've read...
Pizza, terrifyingly good.
I've read some of his things where he's talked about books that he likes, and, some of them have intrigued me enough to go and read those books. But in terms of writing, I wouldn't say I started writing because of Stephen King or anything. I always liked writing, and I liked writing well before I even knew Stephen King was a person. I was writing when I was, a wee little child. What was that noise? Anyway, but I do think his On Writing book is actually really, really great. And if you are interested in writing, I think there's a lot of really good thoughts and insights that definitely can help you inspire your writing and just kind of give you some of the tips to be a better writer. But what's nice about his tips is they're not very specific or particular. They're just more generalities that would just help you be a better writer. He's not you must do X, Y, and Z, and if you don't do those, you can't write. Yeah, I think he has some really, really good advice. What do you think about? Did it inspire you?
I mean, I think when I read books that I read more books, and I've liked a lot of his books, so it's probably increased the rate of which I read. But I was into reading way before I started reading Stephen King books, and I was also into writing way before I read Stephen King books. If anything, I stopped writing because I'm like, these books are too crappy now. I'm gonna write more. So.
And then what? Yeah. If you were able to meet him, what would you say? I don't know. I'd probably just chat with him because like he seems like a pretty nice guy, actually. You know, I feel like he's like elevated to this like, oh, he's the writer, he's the most famous writer, but like he seems really, really down to earth, which is kind of cool. Because I think, you know, it's very hard to be as, I mean, luckily he's a writer, so like even the most popular writers aren't really, you know, they're not celebrities in the way that like Taylor Swift is, or somebody you see all the time that you can recognize. I mean, he is recognizable, but I still think he could like get away with like passing you on the street and you maybe taking a second look, but not necessarily knowing for sure it was him. Whereas, like, you can't really do that with, like, somebody who's in your face and you're seeing all the time.
I mean, he's pretty distinct.
Right,
like
no, I know.
Giant, jowly, fat guy out there.
But I do think, you know, authors just generally, you don't see them, you're reading them. So it's not like, you know, if you see an actor, it's like they have to do a lot more work to be, like, kind of, like, to fly under the radar. But I don't know, I think I would just, like, chat with him about life in general. You probably talked about the Red Sox.
Maybe. Or he's a big movie guy. I probably talked to him about some movies he likes. So let's probably just chat about that, I guess. Maybe try to convince him not to write any more books with Holly.
Oh, no. Have you ever been to Bangor, Maine? I have, but I don't remember, and I was young, and I don't know much about Bangor. I have one of my best friends, though, in college and stuff. He's from Bangor. He literally is from the same town.
That's amazing. Bangor?
You know him.
Bangor? I hardly know her.
Have you ever been there?
No.
Okay. All right, number 16. We're not that far. We just, like, I'm not one of those weirdos
going to Maine
who's like, I'm going to drive 2.5 hours
drive by his
to look at a gate of somebody's house.
Wow.
I feel like I don't want to bother the poor
was
man.
Amazing. Now I guess let's go to the 7-Eleven.
Yeah, I have no desire to do that.
So
like,
they want, like, what, they got taffy up there or something? I don't even know.
I don't think they're like too
A
coastal.
moose?
I think they're a little off the coast, but I don't remember.
A moose around? Right, a couple.
Probably. Which
Go
you
for the
prefer
movies.
more, his books or movies? I mean, you're never going to get me to prefer a movie over a book. I mean, there are definitely books. There are movie versions of books that I think are really good, and there's probably a tiny number of books that I think make better movies. But for the most part, it doesn't matter who the author is. I'm always going to prefer reading a book. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few movies I like better than the book. Not that many. Like American Psycho to me is one of the big ones.
Yeah,
like,
that's
I
a
really
good...
love the. I like the book and I love the movie.
Right.
Stephen King has a couple good movies. Like the first part of It is great.
Yeah.
And of course, if you're going to talk about adaptations, then yeah, Shawshank is way
Stand By
better
Me.
than Rita Hayworth in the Shawshank Redemption, and Stand By Me is way better than
The Body. Yeah.
Right, but those are so loosely connected, it's hard to even compare them. The more, say, accurate adaptations are generally not as good. It's just hard to get the depth in a movie that you get in a book.
Everybody who knows books knows that movies just aren't. I mean, it's a different medium, so there are certain things you can do, I think, that are, like, I will say, like for example, I know this is, like, not Stephen King related, but, like, Harry Potter, it's kind of nice to visualize all of the things that you've read about. It's really fun to see them come to life. But the thing is, like, I always like the Harry Potter movies as a supplement to the books. And I always felt like if you watch the, like, 8 movies, you may enjoy them, but you're never really going to get the full experience unless you've read the books. If you've read the books and watched the movies, I think that's, like, a really good way to put them together. What?
Hmm?
Oh, and he's just making nonsense.
All
right, number 17. Name your favorite Stephen King movies. See, that's kind of weird because, like, I actually don't like a lot of the movies. I like Carrie. The Shining is a good movie if you watch it separately from the book because it's very, very different. I'm like going through like his list. I didn't see the Pet Sematary movie and I don't want to. I actually liked the It miniseries, and I liked Chapter 1 of the new movie. I like Chapter 2, but I do think it's better, like, when you go back and forth versus, like, it just being very solid adult kind of stuff. I haven't seen Misery. I didn't see The Stand. I didn't see Dark Tower. I heard it was a nightmare. The Dolores Claiborne movie was okay, but like, oh, I love The Green Mile. I think The Green Mile might be one of my favorites because that one, I think, very different though, the book too.
They go through the whole list there, or what?
I'm just looking to see, like, yeah, like, I'm not super excited by a lot of the movies, to be honest. Like, they're just not as good as the books.
Yeah. Green Mile is an example of one that might actually be slightly better than the book, but like they're pretty equivalent. I think I do really like Misery a lot. I like the book too, but I also really like the movie. As I said earlier, It Part 1 is awesome. That's probably his best movie outside of Shawshank, but again, it's not really his.
Oh, you know what's kind of good is, like, the ones that aren't based on books. Like, Storm of the Century was pretty good for about 3/4 of the miniseries.
Books.
Right.
Like Rose Red.
Rose Red was good.
The first half of that was awesome. The second half was like,
yeah. But yeah, I think, like, I've enjoyed his, I mean, I haven't seen Creepshow.
Oh, that's fun. I like
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't think.
Psychological Poncho.
I mean, his movies are fun. I mean, obviously, The Shining's considered the best, just in terms of a movie, but it's just not as good as the book.
Right.
All right, so that's our Stephen King. We'll be back with some other stuff.
Yes, stuff. Boop.
Boop.